One of the more bizarre Formula One stories to emerge recently has come from some comments from Fernando Alonso, who claimed ahead of the Belgian Grand Prix weekend that he received and rejected an offer from Red Bull for the 2019 Formula One season. Now, what followed were a few days of Alonso repeating this claim and Red Bull continuously seeming to deny it. The only thing they did agree on was that there was definitely an offer made in 2007, long before Red Bull was a front-running team. Scott Mitchell and Ben Anderson, Autosport's Formula One correspondents, are with me to discuss this slightly quirky F1 driver market story. Now, Scott, you had the perhaps unfortunate role of being in the paddock at Spa and having to try and keep up with this verbal tennis between Christian Horner and Alonso. What was that like, and what do you make of this whole scenario?
Well, it's confusing because, first of all, it was like Alonso had a pre-recorded interview that came out, and there was one little bit that came out to begin with that triggered it all, so which Red Bull responded to. They denied it, and then more from Alonso came out, but again it was pre-recorded stuff. So then Red Bull were responding again, like live, to something that was like this tit for tat, but without the first real blow. It was really odd. And then obviously as the weekend went on, got to Alonso's media session on Saturday, and it's like, okay, can you draw a line under this confusion, please? Why do you think you had these offers? Do you want?
And this is a question you put to him. Isn't it?
Why do you think you have these offers, and do you need to speak to Horner to clear out the confusion? And he said, "There's no confusion. I had all of these offers," and he detailing them massively, 5 different offers, and says that he didn't go to them next year because he didn't think that they could offer him a chance to win.
Now, Ben, I have 2 questions for you, which I'll put to you both. Do we really think Red Bull made this offer for 2019? And if so, do we really think that Fernando Alonso would turn down one last shot in an Adrian Newey F1 car?
Well, if you're a top Formula One team and a top driver becomes available suddenly, you'd be remiss to not approach that driver, at least sound out what their availability is, what their plans are, how much they would cost to get on board. So I can believe there was some kind of approach made, but it's about your definition of an offer. Like Horner said live on Channel 4 that, to his knowledge, no one's ever offered a contract to Fernando Alonso since 2007. But of course, the difference between approaching somebody in their management and offering a contract can be quite big.
So we could end up in a situation where actually both people are kind of right and kind of telling the truth.
And that's kind of how I feel about it. I feel that somebody in Red Bull has approached Alonso's management to say, oh, so you're not staying at McLaren, what are you going to do? Could you maybe see yourself coming here? And you could imagine that Alonso's gone, well, my mind's made up. I'm leaving Formula One. I'm not interested in going through the Honda nightmare again, so thank you very much, but I'll park that.
Well, we know as well that Formula One management and Flavio Briatore did get involved with Red Bull, that there was a push from the F1 chiefs to see if Red Bull would take Alonso to replace Ricciardo. It was it was quite funny. There were a few sort of seasoned hacks in the F1 media centre lamenting the Bernie days at Spa, saying, "Oh well, if Bernie was still in charge, that would have happened. It wouldn't have been, oh, can you do this? It would have been, right, what's it going to take for you to put Fernando in the car?" So there was definitely contact. No one's denied that there wasn't contact of some kind over this, but
it could be mediated, I guess,
exactly.
Between Red Bull and Alonso. You've got FOM in the middle and management teams in the middle, that maybe it had nothing to do with Horner and Alonso ultimately.
The disagreement is over whether or not there was a concrete offer, and Alonso is basically, he's either been told there was, or he's interpreted what's happened as a concrete offer and said no to them. I mean, you can, on the one hand, you can kind of, to answer your question about whether he would turn them down, you can see why he might maybe not have faith in Honda after the 3 seasons they had with one another, but Red Bull's absolutely adamant that they can win. They could have won 2-3 Grand Prix this year with Honda engines, and if Red Bull are that confident, I just don't see why you would seriously dismiss it, unless by that point Alonso's just like, I'm done with this, I can't be bothered. But
also they're not going to be in title contention, are they? That's probably the big thing. And Alonso has been in that situation before, where he goes to a big team with a young upstart driver in it who's already got his feet under the table. Does he really want to go through the whole Lewis Hamilton 2007 scenario again? He probably just thinks, well, for the sake of a few more Grand Prix wins when I want to win a championship, it's not worth the pain.
You're talking there, of course, about the idea of going up against Max Verstappen. Now, Fernando Alonso versus Max Verstappen in the same team, that's got fireworks written all over it, hasn't it?
Well, that's the sort of storyline that F1 would absolutely love to have. We talk about what Alonso brings at the moment. For me, the fact that he dominated headlines last weekend a Grand Prix where his team was comfortably the slowest, slower even than Williams, and he was at the back of the grid. How can this person that has not been relevant on track for 4 years still dominate headlines? That's what he brings to F1.
Yeah, there's no disputing that Fernando Alonso is box office for F1, and we're going to miss him next year. Now, Alonso's F1 career, if it's over, I think is going to be characterised by bad decisions, or certainly at least ending up in the right place at the wrong time. Could we argue that turning down Red Bull, if Honda gets everything right and that this is a formidable package next year, is this his final bad decision in F1?
Well, the one thing that Red Bull and Alonso did agree on was the 2007 offer. And of course, if Alonso had taken that offer, he'd have had 1 year learning the team in 08 when they were still building up, and then he would have fought for the title in 09, maybe would have beaten Button to that crown, and then swept up all of Vettel's championships, all those race wins that allowed him to, well, not all of them, but most of the race wins that have allowed him to since surpass Prost. So you'd have to say that that was probably a bad decision in hindsight, even though he obviously had this big romantic period with Ferrari. In terms of next year, I think it's a little bit more difficult. Alonso knows he's kind of closer to the end of his F1 career than the start. As I said before, Red Bull Honda may well be in contention for some race victories next year, probably only at certain circuits. Is that really enough of a temptation when you know a title challenge is some way off still and maybe not achievable?
I think the thing for next year is that you don't really know sort of whether or not it would be a concrete success story. So the joke is that based on Alonso's track record, Red Bull Honda will be fighting for titles next year, because that will just go with the narrative of him making the wrong decisions. But if you look at the offers he says he turned down, 07, you can kind of understand that because they hadn't really emerged as a proper force by then. But then he says he turned them down in 09 because he was basically on the brink of signing for Ferrari and it was a bit last minute. Again, okay, they've sort of emerged, but not quite. Ferrari you would bank as the better bet. But then in 2011 and 2013, it becomes harder to justify because all of the evidence is mounting to suggest that Red Bull is the force at the moment. Ferrari's got all of these problems in the background. So I just don't see there where the logic comes in that actually it's better off. He keeps saying that, oh, I just thought the next year with Ferrari was going to be the one. It's like, but Red Bull's winning now. So
well, 11 and 13 were Red Bull and Vettel's most dominant championships as well. You'd be crazy to turn it down at that
exactly.
point.
So I wonder if he sort of is a combination of if he really did, then it's a combination of being comfortable at Ferrari, number one status, doesn't want to go to Red Bull where Vettel's dominating, basically what he's got with Verstappen now if he was going to go there next year. So yeah, I think it does fit with this narrative of him making the wrong decisions. The early calls not to go there you can kind of accept, but the longer it went on, the less that argument holds up.
Well, Lewis Hamilton said pre-Spa that part of being a great Formula 1 driver is making the right decisions and moving at the right time, so you don't end up stuck in the wrong car when you should be at the front. So you can argue 07 ultimately Alonso should have looked maybe more closely at the way Red Bull was building up and the fact it was hiring Adrian Newey, and he remains the preeminent Formula 1 designer of the last few decades. So why would you pass that up? You can see the trajectory that's going on. The Ferrari pull, I think, has a massive emotional draw for drivers. So I can kind of understand once he's in there, he's winning races, he's got close to the championship a few times. I can buy that argument of, oh, well, next year will be the one that we finally nail. And of course, ultimately he finally gave up on that argument, and then they did start to get stronger again in the V6 era. But a lot of people use that stick to beat Alonso with and say, well, look at what Vettel's doing at Ferrari now, that could be you. And he always says, well, I didn't have a contract up to 2016, so 2014 was no good, 2015 I might have won a few races, and then after that it's at the point at which they've become title contenders, I wouldn't have been there. It would have been a whole new negotiation. So in that sense, you can kind of see why he decided to kind of give up on that and look elsewhere. But when you look at his whole career, ultimately he does seem like a victim of his own mistakes, really.